Well, with respect to Speaker McCarthy, our conversations have been generally productive. We agree to disagree at times without being disagreeable. We strongly disagree with each other on the approach that has been taken by House Republicans with respect to Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, and Ilhan Omar. It's a double, triple, quadruple, and beyond standard when you think about all of the members. These are just three who have engaged in highly offensive, at times anti-Semitic behavior, rhetoric, hate, including making reference, the gentlewoman from Georgia, to Hitler and Nazis, and drawing an incredibly dangerous and false equivalence between Hitler, Nazis, and President Joe Biden. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has been rewarded with a seat on the Homeland Security Committee. You can't make this up. So Speaker McCarthy knows I strongly disagree with him and them on this issue. And this type of poisonous, toxic, double standard is going to complicate the relationship moving forward between House Democrats and House Republicans. Morning, everyone. It's been a very important week for President Biden and Democrats in framing the moment that we are in, the work that has been accomplished under the leadership of President Biden, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, House and Senate Democrats in getting big things done on the issues of importance to everyday Americans, creating more than 12 million jobs in President Biden's first 2 years in office, reducing the deficit by $1.7 trillion, lowering costs, supercharging the economy when it was on the brink of a deep recession, and moving in the right direction. As President Biden eloquently, strongly, thoughtfully articulated in the face of very disrespectful, unbecoming behavior on the other side of the aisle, that we've done a lot, but there's still work to be done to lower costs, to fight for better paying jobs in every single community, and of course to lean in on public safety. And we look forward to partnering with President Biden in the work ahead, implementing the tremendous pieces of legislation that were passed into law, while at the same time defending Social Security, defending Medicare, defending democracy, defending a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, and pushing back against the extreme MAGA Republican agenda, which is totally out of control. Yeah, I think the concern here is that what is being unleashed is an opportunity, and in schools across the country, you have librarians. And so what is clear in terms of the book bans that will emerge from this legislation that's being pushed is that the extreme MAGA Republicans are effectively saying that if anyone in any school has an objection to a book, even if it's an objection to books about the Native American experience, books about civil rights, books about the Holocaust, books about baseball, Roberto Clemente, books about Dr. King, if any single person has an objection to a book, that book must be removed from the classroom or from the school library. That is censorship. That is a book ban, because it effectively means that individuals are not simply being empowered to say that they prefer that someone in their family not have an opportunity to read about the Holocaust or slavery or the Civil Rights Movement or the Asian American experience in America. No. That the books should be banned for everyone. The books should be removed from the school library. The books should be removed from the classroom. Questions?
Mr. Jeffries, in one of his late-night Truth Social missives last night, the former president said there would be a potential for, quote, death and destruction should Alvin Bragg choose to charge him in his investigation. What's your response to that?
Well, the twice impeached former president's rhetoric is reckless, reprehensible, and irresponsible. It's dangerous, and if he keeps it up, he's going to get someone killed. We've already seen the consequences of incitement from the former president. He is principally responsible for inciting the violent insurrection that happened on January 6th, but clearly he has not learned his lesson. It's also very unfortunate that the extreme MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives continue to back President Trump and his reckless and his violent and his hateful and his disgusting rhetoric. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to the extreme MAGA Republican effort to default on our debt, crash the economy, and trigger a job-killing recession. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have been focused on putting people over politics. Lower costs, better paying jobs, safer communities, fighting for reproductive freedom, defending democracy, ensuring an economy that works for everyday Americans. People over politics. And we've made clear from the very beginning that we're willing to find common ground with the other side of the aisle for the good of the American people whenever and wherever possible. But we've also made clear that we will fight extremism whenever necessary. And so we are here on the floor today because this default crisis is before the American people as a result of extreme MAGA Republicans making the political calculation that they will benefit in 2024 if they crash the economy, if America defaults, if we fail to pay our bills, if millions of people are made to suffer. Not our words. Those are the words of former President Donald Trump, the words of the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, the words of extreme MAGA Republicans at the very far right of their conference. A political calculation that we're going to take hostages, the American people, the economy, and threaten to crash the economy, hurt these hostages if necessary, or extract painful cuts to our veterans, to disabled children on Medicaid, to people who rely on nutrition assistance, including our veterans, to children, to teachers, to public safety, and of course to our military families. These are the stakes that are before the American people. That's why House Democrats are here on the floor fighting. How do we know that the other side of the aisle has made the determination that they are willing to default on our debt to crash the economy? Is because this default crisis is before the American people. On June 1st, America may run out of the ability to pay our bills, and extreme MAGA Republicans have chosen to get out of town before sundown, to flee Washington, D.C., to risk a dangerous default in a crisis that they've created. And these Republicans, they're going to say that Joe Biden refused to sit down with them. That's a fake narrative that they've continued to try to put into the public domain. They said that President Biden refused to talk for 97 days. Fake, false, fraudulent narrative. How do we know? The timeline is pretty clear. On February 1st, President Biden sat down with the Speaker of the House. They had a conversation in the Oval Office, and President Biden said that we will produce our budget on March 9th so that the American people know our values, know the types of investments that should be made for their health, their safety, and their economic well-being, and challenge the extreme MAGA Republicans to do the same thing. And on March 9th, President Biden produced his budget, a budget that will strengthen and protect Social Security, a budget that will build an economy from the middle out and the ground up, a budget that will cut the deficit by an additional $3 trillion on top of the $1.7 trillion that has already been cut by the Biden administration over the last 2 years. And then we waited for Republicans to produce their budget. Early March, no budget. Mid-March, no budget. Late March, no budget. Early April, no Republican budget. Mid-April, no Republican budget. And then on April 25th, they didn't produce a budget. They produced the Default on America Act, not a budget, a ransom note, threatening to hurt the well-being of the American people with draconian cuts. They introduced it on April 25th. On April 26th, they voted on it. And they passed it simply because George Santos, a serial fraudster, provided the deciding vote. This is who they are. And then on April 27th, they got out of town. Some of them were overseas for 10 days. And then as soon as they got back into town, Tuesday, May 9th, President Biden, first opportunity he had, reconvened all of us in the Oval Office. That's the timeline. From the very beginning, Democrats have been willing to do two things. One, that America must pay our bills, period, full stop, in a manner consistent with what has been done under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, including by House Democrats, making sure we avoided a default 3 times under the previous administration. Notwithstanding the fact we had strong policy disagreements with what Republicans were doing at the time, including passing the 2017 GOP tax scam, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1%, sticking us with an additional $2 trillion worth of debt. Why? To subsidize the lifestyles of the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. We had strong policy disagreements with what was going on in the Trump administration, but we never threatened to default on our debt. That's a patriotic thing to do. And so we helped make sure we avoided a default 3 times, notwithstanding the fact that in our country's 247-year history, 25% of the nation's debt was racked up under the 4 years of the Trump administration. How dare you lecture America about fiscal responsibility with that shameful record? Notwithstanding the fact that you've racked up unprecedented amounts of debt to subsidize the rich, the richest amongst us, and big corporations. We never threatened a default. But yet here we are, a few days from America being unable to pay our bills because you've made a political calculation that you will be successful in 2024 if you crash the economy. That's wrong. That's cruel. That's un-American. Because you'll be hurting veterans, hurting children, hurting seniors, hurting young people, hurting everyday Americans. And that's why Democrats are here today in Washington, fighting hard against this unreasonable manufactured default crisis. This is a default crisis that is manufactured MAGA madness. It is repugnant, reckless, and reprehensible. It's unacceptable, it's unconscionable, and it's American. And that's why House Democrats have remained on the House floor fighting hard for everyday Americans. That's why we are here, and we will continue to fight for working families, continue to fight for middle-class folks, continue to fight for all those who aspire to be part of the middle class, continue to fight for young people, continue to fight for older Americans, continue to fight for veterans, continue to fight for military families, continue to fight for people in urban America and rural America and suburban America and small-town America and the heartland of America, continue to fight for the people in Appalachia, continue to fight for the poor, the sick, and the afflicted, continue to fight for the least, the lost, and the left behind. House Democrats will continue to fight for everyday Americans to avoid a default, and we will not rest until victory is won.
There's a bit of a kerfuffle about how the White House displayed the pride flag for Pride Month here alongside American flags. Senator Marshall has introduced legislation to say, look, we need to adhere to this flag code. Speaker McCarthy hung American flags out front here yesterday. What do you make of this, number one? And do you think that the White House went, did they err in any way, the way they displayed the pride flag, the way that the flag code is supposed to be displaying the American flag?
Extreme MAGA Republicans continue to engage in petty performance politics. They are not serious about addressing the issues that are of importance to the American people. I'm unfamiliar with this controversy, so to speak, that Republicans are spending their time putting into the public domain, but I am confident that what the American people want us to focus on is building an economy that works for the middle class and all those Americans who aspire to be part of the middle class. The fact that House Democrats are continuing to work to solve the challenges that the American people confront in terms of their economic well-being, their future, and the ability to achieve the American dream, as compared with the extreme MAGA Republicans, who are simply trying to jam their right-wing ideology and their conspiracy theories and their fealty to the twice-impeached former president down the throats of the American people. House Democrats will continue to put people over politics, to fight for lower cost, better paying jobs, safer communities, reproductive freedom, defend democracy, confront the gun violence epidemic, and build an economy that grows the middle class. We're focused on an economy that works for everyday Americans, builds upon the progress that President Biden has led, and grows the middle class. Republicans are focused on their extremism and their conspiracy theories and bending the knee to Donald Trump. House Republicans have no agenda, no vision, no plan to deal with the economy, job creation, health care, gun safety, or anything that matters to the American people. And that's what this week once again shows. Instead, they're peddling conspiracy theories before the Judiciary Committee. The oversight chairperson is totally out of control and unhinged. They're obsessed with Adam Schiff. First, they kick him off the Intel Committee. Then they try to fine him $16 million. That fails. Donald Trump threatens to primary them. And they immediately respond to the puppet master by bringing a censure resolution back to the floor of the House of Representatives. Today, the extreme MAGA Republicans want to impeach Joe Biden. You can't make this stuff up. Their extremism continues to be on full display. And they are doing nothing nothing to enhance the health, the safety, or the economic well-being of the American people.
How do Democrats see that from a political standpoint? Obviously, Democrats were very successful in running on the Dobbs decision last year, but seeing a vote like that, and seeing some of these efforts to get so-called woke policies out of the military, how do you then turn that around against the Republicans next year?
First of all, it was shocking to me that the so-called moderates from New York and all across the country, like Anthony D'Esposito, Nick LaLota, Michael Lawler, Mark Molinaro, and of course, George Santos, among others, who do all that they can to project moderation. We're reasonable. We're not part of Team Extreme. But every single opportunity they have to vote with the American people, to vote with the women of this country, to vote with Team Reasonable, Team Normal, Team America, that's the House Democratic Caucus, every opportunity they have to show their reasonableness and distance themselves from the most extreme elements of their party, they fail to pass the test. Now, our view of the National Defense Authorization Act is that it is woefully irresponsible that extreme MAGA Republicans have hijacked a bipartisan bill that is essential to our national security and taken it over and weaponized it in order to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. That's why they've used the National Defense Authorization Act to continue their march toward a nationwide ban on abortion care and applying it to women service members and military spouses. That's outrageous. And it undermines our national security because we have an all-volunteer military. That means, as President Truman first recognized in 1948, when he desegregated the military, that in an increasingly diverse society, you have to have all hands on deck. Every corner of society should feel welcome in the military. We have to recruit from every segment of society in order to make sure that we're prepared in an increasingly dangerous world. And the good news is that every corner of American society, from communities of color, from women, from members of the LGBTQ plus community, have stepped up to say, we want to serve. We want to protect and defend all that America is about. That's why we have an incredibly diverse military, and it's good for the nation. But these extreme MAGA Republicans have decided that we want to attack women who serve in the military. We want to attack communities of color who are disproportionately overrepresented in military service. And we want to attack members of the LGBTQ plus community. This is incredibly irresponsible in terms of our national security. And that's why I'm going to strongly oppose this hyper-partisan, extreme right-wing effort to undermine our national security.
Dear members, the concerns might be deeper than what Mr. Crane said last night. We had a whole week. We had a Republican in the Senate trying to define white nationalism. And right there at that podium about a half hour ago, Mr. Good of Virginia said he doesn't know what white nationalism is or if it's in the military. What do you make of all this? This is people you serve with.
You have individuals in this country and across the Congress, including within the House Republican Conference, which clearly has been taken over by extreme MAGA Republicans, and individuals like George Santos and others who have outwardly expressed sympathy for white supremacy, that want to turn back the clock. But as Democrats, led by President Biden, we're going to continue to move the country forward, recognizing that our diversity in every possible way, our racial diversity, our ethnic diversity, our religious diversity, our socioeconomic diversity, our cultural diversity, is one of America's greatest strengths. It's an economic advantage for us in terms of our competitiveness on the global stage. And it's one of the reasons why we are leaders of the free world. And that should be embraced and welcomed, not undermined. But there are people who want to turn back the clock.
Forgive me if you addressed this before I got here, and I know it's only July, but the appropriations markups, that process seems to be getting started, and I'm wondering how concerned you are that Republicans might not be holding up their end of the bargain on the spending levels that were set during the debt ceiling conversations, that we could find ourselves in shutdown territory come later this fall.
Extreme MAGA Republicans in the House are determined to shut down the government unless we as Democrats agree to their ransom demands, which include, but are not limited to, cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, cutting veterans benefits, cutting public education, cutting our ability to provide for the safety of the American people, including as part of their effort to defund the FBI and the Department of Justice. These are inherently unreasonable demands. But these are ransom demands that are being made. And the extreme MAGA Republicans have created a situation where basically they're telling the American people, unless you agree to undermining your health, your safety, your economic well-being, we're going to shut down the government. That's the track that we are on right now. And it's inherently irresponsible, but no one should be surprised because this is an extreme group of people who are in charge temporarily on the Republican side in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. So what's your sense on the MilCon VA bill? Do you see it passing today? And then what do you make of tomorrow's session likely being canceled if you confirm that highway?
Well, that's a decision that will be made by the Republican majority, and I expect that there'll be some discussion of that sometime soon. In terms of the appropriations process that has been hijacked by the most extreme wing of the Republican Party, which is increasingly a majority. And as a result, instead of taking a bipartisan approach to figuring out how do we invest in the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people, the extreme MAGA Republicans have hijacked every single one of these appropriations bills that it is our responsibility to pass in order to march toward a nationwide ban on abortion, to target communities of color, to ban books, to bully members of the LGBTQ community, and to try and erode the social safety net that is so important to the American middle class.
Given how little progress has been made this week in the House in connection with spending bills, are you concerned that there's not going to be an ability to reach a short-term spending agreement?
House Republicans have made clear that they are determined to shut down the government and try to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. We believe, as House Democrats, that we should continue to find common ground. And it also appears that Senate Republicans share our views as well. And so you have House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and President Biden and the administration all in lockstep that we reached an agreement as it relates to spending levels that provide for the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people. It was passed into law. It was bipartisan in nature. House Democrats overwhelmingly supported that agreement. It's an agreement that protected Social Security, protected Medicare, protected Medicaid, protected veterans, protected public education. And we believe that we should stick with that agreement. Extreme MAGA Republicans are the only ones in Washington, D.C. who are trying to breach that agreement as part of their effort to undermine the health, the safety, the economic well-being of the American people, because they want to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of everyday Americans by doing things like restricting the ability of women in the military to be able to make their own reproductive health care decisions if they are in restrictive states. That's none of the business of these right-wing politicians, but that's one of the reasons why they're marching us toward a government shutdown, and it's wrong. First row, get there.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the Farm Bill deadline. It's coming up. We've heard that Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson, he says that he thinks that an extension may be necessary. Do you also agree with that? Are there any priorities that you think should be included in the Farm Bill? And we can also get your reaction to the news out of NASA this morning saying they have not found evidence that UAPs are extraterrestrial.
I haven't seen that particular report, but look forward to evaluating it. In terms of the Farm Bill, this has been a legislative area where in the past, Democrats and Republicans have worked together. And it's our continued hope that we'll be able to do that to support our nation's farmers and to support the need to meet the nutritional needs of the American people all across America, in urban America, in rural America, in suburban America, in exurban America, in small town America, in the heartland of America, and in Appalachia. The Farm Bill should not be a divisive area. It is fertile ground for cooperation and for common ground and for coming together. The only problem that we confront now is that the extreme MAGA Republicans want to hijack the Farm Bill and to take it in a certain direction, inconsistent with meeting the needs of farmers and the American people, and we will oppose that every step of the way.
So do you think an extension is necessary?
We'll evaluate that the closer we get to the deadline.
Thanks, Leader Jeffries. What are the sticking points for Democrats when it comes to the defense appropriations bill? With the NDAA, while the amendment that would have prohibited funding for a DEI office was passed, the amendment that would have prohibited funding for any DEI failed. So there is that loophole where DEI could still be taught in the military. So what are the issues for Democrats when it comes to the defense appropriations bill? Is it the travel for abortion?
The defense appropriations bill is a non-starter for a variety of reasons, focused primarily on the fact that the legislation is not designed to ensure that our military is in a state of readiness. The Republicans are using the defense appropriations bill to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of military women, men, and families. That is wrong. And by the way, the last time I checked, they can't even bring the defense appropriations bill to the floor because they've totally lost control of the floor to the extremists who are running the House Republican conference. That's why they're shutting down the government. That's why they're trying to impeach the president illegitimately as part of a partisan political stunt. House Republicans are being driven by the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, George Santos, and Donald Trump. That's who's running the circus right now. And it is a three-ring circus. In ring one, shut down the government. Ring two, impeach President Biden. Ring three, jam your extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people. So the American people right now are seeing a clear contrast. House Democrats are fighting to make life better for everyday Americans. More money, more time, more freedom. More money in your pockets, more time with your children and your families, more freedom, including the freedom to make your own reproductive health care decisions. House Republicans are fighting each other. And you know what it means for everyday Americans? More chaos, more dysfunction, and more extremism. It's sad, it's dangerous, and it's pathetic.
What are examples of issues that the Democrats have with this House bill?
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from New York. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 minute. To the gentleman from New York, the distinguished Democratic leader, Mr. Jeffries.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for the minute.
I want to thank my distinguished colleague from the great state of Wisconsin for yielding time to me on this amendment and on the underlying bill. Question was just asked, why do we have a White House Gender Policy Council? It's a pretty simple answer to that question. Because here in America, there are two contrasting visions as it relates to reproductive freedom. Democrats believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. Extreme MAGA Republicans have a very different view. Extreme MAGA Republicans want to criminalize abortion care. Extreme MAGA Republicans want to impose a nationwide ban. Extreme MAGA Republicans want us to live in a society where women have government-mandated pregnancies. That's the dichotomy that we confront right now. Reproductive freedom is at issue all across America. And you're either on the right side of that issue or you're on the wrong side. And we believe that my Republican colleagues continue to march us toward a nationwide abortion ban. Just look at the underlying legislation, which by its very definition restricts hundreds of thousands of people here in the District of Columbia as it relates to reproductive freedom. Why is it in this bill? It's because there's a real policy difference. House Democrats support a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, period, full stop. A choice that should be between a woman, her doctor, her faith, her family, not a bunch of extreme politicians. But that's the vision that's being offered to us by our friends on the other side of the. That's the reason why the White House has taken the step forward to make sure that they're protecting women all across America from efforts to try to criminalize abortion care. And I wonder, what lesson has been learned from the events of just this week? What lesson was learned in Ohio? What lesson was learned in Virginia? What lesson was learned in Kentucky, the deepest of red states? Why does this continue to happen? Jam an extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the women of America. That is what we're against. That is why we oppose this amendment. That is one of the reasons why we oppose this underlying bill. Now, from the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear, we want to find common ground with our Republican colleagues on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, if it relates to making life better for everyday Americans. House Democrats are all about putting people over politics, fighting for things like lower costs, growing the middle class, safer communities, things that will make a difference, solve problems in the lives of everyday Americans. And part of the challenge that we faced is that the extreme MAGA Republican agenda continues to be focused on the wrong things. Extreme MAGA Republican agenda focused on defaulting on America's debt, shutting down the government, crashing the economy, criminalizing reproductive freedom, cutting Social Security and Medicare, impeaching President Biden, and doing nothing to deal with affordability issues or improving the quality of life of everyday Americans. That's a shame. And so, yes, we're going to continue to oppose Republican efforts to criminalize abortion care. Now, tomorrow, next month, next year, and forever, until this effort to take away reproductive freedom is buried in the ground, never to rise again. I yield back.
I'm wondering if you consider the size of the national debt a concern in the budget deficits. Obviously, you disagree with Republicans on how to handle it, but I'm wondering if there's anything you think should be done other than higher taxes on the wealthy.
Yeah, 25% of America's debt, 25%. And we've now been a country for 247 years. 25% of America's debt was accumulated during the 4 years of the Trump administration. So, yes, we should look at some of the policies of the Trump administration, such as the GOP tax scam, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1% in America, and our children and grandchildren were asked to shoulder $2 trillion worth of debt to pay for the lifestyles of the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, who weren't even asking for a dramatic tax cut? Yeah, that's a problem. The interesting thing is that when you look at the Democratic track record, we actually reduced the deficit. Bill Clinton inherited a deficit and turned it into a surplus. President Barack Obama inherited a $1.5 trillion deficit and 2 failed wars, as well as a great recession, and turned that $1.5 trillion deficit into a $500 billion deficit, cutting $1 trillion. And despite all of the problems inherited by President Biden, because the previous 4 years was a complete and total train wreck, President Biden was able to oversee one of the most productive Congresses in American history, American Rescue Plan, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, PACT Act, gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years, CHIPS and Science Act, which brought domestic manufacturing jobs back home to the United States of America, and the Inflation Reduction Act, striking a blow against the climate crisis, lowering prescription drug prices, including dropping the price of insulin to $35 a month, and did all of that while reducing the deficit by $1.7 trillion. So our view is that, yes, we are going to continue to deal with our debt and deficit problems because Democratic presidents have always done it. The problem actually comes from the extreme MAGA Republicans. They talk a good game. Their track record is horrible.